Good evening, Tom. As you all know, the NPA has asked me to say a few words in honour of your award here this evening, so permit me to begin. The NPA has graced Thomas Phipps Jr. with its Sagnac Award, as all here know. But if infinite alternative universes exist, it is a racing certainty that as we speak and smile and joke, George Sagnac is receiving the NPA's Phipps Award in some alternative Long Beach, California. This is a perfect and entirely fitting symmetry to my mind. In the short time available this evening, it is impossible to give justice to the brilliance and breadth of Tom's thinking within the subject which begars us all. I will begin by gazing upon three jewels, three ideas, one of which is so commonsensical it hardly seems worthy of comment, and yet most certainly is, and two which left me in what I can only describe as a dazed admiration for his ability to join the dots left for so long enjoined by all else. The first jewel is Tom's notion of the covering theory, so entirely sensible, so humdrum, and yet so significant and so radically different from Kuhn's paradigm shift. It is this idea which has provided the foundation upon which so much else of his work stands. The second jewel, which shines ever brightly for me, concerns the Hertz formulation of the equations of electromagnetism. You will remember that the Hertz formulation is arrived at by merely replacing every partial time derivative within Maxwell's equations by a total time derivative. This simple formal change renders the equations of electromagnetism Galilean invariant, a point of huge significance, but it requires an interpretation of the convective velocity so introduced. To cut a long story short, Hertz's interpretation failed in the lab, and the rest mostly is history. Whilst others have tried to make sense of the Hertz formulation, it is for me Tom's take which has the ring of absolute common sense truth about it. In Maxwell's formulation, the charge comprising the detector must be stationary in the lab frame. Fine so far as it goes. This allowed a simplicity of description. But there is no reason on earth why the detector should be so stationary. All it requires to parameterize any motion assigned to it is a simple velocity. Why not Hertz's convective velocity? Asked Tom. So penetrating, so simple, so significant, so perfect. The third jewel, which left me feeling as if I had been shortchanged by my earlier education, is Tom's covering theory for classical and quantum mechanics, which, one can so easily imagine, may well have things to say about the subatomic world. The fact that Bohr's correspondence principle is in reality no such thing had entirely escaped me as a young man, but not Tom Phipps, who saw in Bohr's principle an opportunity for the greater improvement of theoretical mechanics. And the definitive model for Tom's modus operandi in matters of this kind is, of course, pose purloined letter. There are many other things I could mention, as you will know, but let me move on by asking what has driven this man's science, and, of equal importance, whence came his ability to express it with such eloquence in the written word. I don't suppose for a moment that Tom has heroes, at least, and borrowing his father, not in science. It is certain that his love of science was learned at his father's knee, and his lab skills also. Who amongst us would not have wished for such a father? Most of us take our attitudes from our parents, either directly or in strongly opposed reaction. I rather fancy that Tom was not in opposition to his father, and so we can easily imagine how his acute ability to ask the penetrating forensic question, which so frequently has revealed the nonsense of a conventional position, came directly from this father. Now, it is one thing to have smart ideas, but it is another thing entirely to bring others to read those ideas and further to think about them. The very best communicators of science succeed by weaving a narrative around the ideas concerned. and it is a narrative which draws us in. Tom Phipps' ability to weave the story around the science, the story which draws us in with its dazzling prose, bears comparison with the very best. It is of the very, very best. As a personal aside on the qualities of Tom's writing, I might add that one of the small pleasures of my family's life is for a letter from Urbana, Illinois to arrive at our home, whether to myself, my wife Priscilla, or to William, our youngest son, for whom Tom has been a diligent, if far away, godfather. The words of this letter will never fail to warm our hearts, will never fail to put a smile on our faces, and will never fail to persuade us over again that the civilized world continues to exist in Illinois. But whence comes his ability to pen such fine words? In the first instance, of course, we may infer that Dr. Phipps must be a remarkably well-read man. But few of us arrive in such a state of grace by our own efforts alone, by which I mean that a love of literature, such an important element of the rounded life, must be nurtured. And is it reasonable to infer that the nurturing angel was Tom's mother, I wonder? I think so, with father cheering in the wings. So, according to my inferences, whilst we may thank Tom's father for nurturing Tom's love of the scientific quest, it is to Tom's mother we must offer thanks for his ability to render the writing of that quest as a truly epic tale, with its heroes and villains, its pitfalls and hidden treasures. The purloined letter comes to mind again. Wonderful. Since I have been given the honour of saying these few words, it is perhaps fitting to round them off by relating to you how Tom and I met. My particular interests are far narrower than Tom's, and lie in the general area of cosmology and astrophysics, subjects which lie at the margins of Tom's major interests. In the context of my story, this is an important detail, for it explains why, even as late as 1987, I had never heard of Dr. Thomas E. Phipps Jr., and he most certainly had never heard of me. But in the late spring of that year, I was attending a small meeting in Paris, arranged by Roy C. Keyes to discuss, as I recall, the redshift problem with Picard, Vigier, Arb, and a few other such dangerous-to-know individuals. Roy turned up with a pile of identical books of science written by somebody I'd never heard of, and a copy of which he pushed onto each of us whilst extracting a promise to read the book concerned. I will be honest, I was less than keen. I had endured enough already unsolicited, turgid, didactic tomes to render my liberal scientific conscience almost dead. But I had promised Roy I would at least open the book, and that is all I intended to do. The book was Heretical Verities, and 5 days later I reached the last page, and the following day I reached for a pen, which action brought me here today. So, let us raise a glass. Tom Phipps. Tom, thank you for so enriching our lives.